It is, it's fascinating how much trust we put in our own
Oh,
minds.
absolutely. We trust them completely.
Right. Like for you listening, you might pride yourself on your ability to remember, I don't know, the exact birth dates of everyone in your extended family.
Or maybe you swear you can recall the hyper-specific details of your fifth birthday party at Chuck E. Cheese.
Exactly. You picture the neon lights or like the exact color of the icing on the cake, the loud noises of the arcade. It feels incredibly solid.
Yeah, it feels like a high-definition video recording.
But, well, what is actually happening in our brain when we confidently remember something that, never actually happened?
Because today we are going to look at why that video camera analogy is just completely wrong.
Yeah. It turns out your memory is a lot more like a constantly edited Wikipedia page.
A Wikipedia page where the editors are occasionally sleep-deprived, highly suggestible, and desperately trying to connect dots that, frankly, do not actually connect.
It is a brilliant and, honestly, slightly terrifying way to look at it.
It really is.
So, to truly unpack this for you listening, we are actually adopting a specific focus for this deep dive. I'm going to step into the role of the curious student, asking the questions.
And I will be taking on the role of the lecturer, guiding us and explaining the material as we go.
Which I think is going to be really fun. So, Professor, consider me enrolled.
I happily embrace the lecturer role. Consider this your master class on the fragile, flexible, and sometimes pretty unsettling nature of human recall.
Awesome. And where exactly are we getting our material for today's class?
Our core material today is drawn directly from Section 8.3 of Chapter 8 from Psychology 2E.
Okay, section 8.3.
Yeah, and we are exploring the entire spectrum of memory failure here, from, catastrophic physical brain injuries all the way to the frustrating reason you forgot why you just walked into the kitchen.
Oh, I do that way too often. So, Professor, let's start at the extreme end of that spectrum.
Okay, let's do it.
Because before we can understand why an everyday memory fails, we should probably understand what happens when the physical hardware of the brain completely crashes.
Perfect starting point. The textbook begins by breaking down amnesia,
Right.
which is a profound loss of long-term memory, usually resulting from disease or physical trauma or psychological trauma.
And we probably need to strip away the Hollywood soap opera version of amnesia here.
Oh, definitely. TV gets it so wrong. We need to look at the two distinct clinical realities: retrograde amnesia and anterograde amnesia.
Okay, I'm assuming one is about losing the past and one is about losing the future.
Precisely. So let's look at retrograde amnesia first. This is a retrieval failure. You basically lose the memory for events that occurred prior to the trauma.
Got it.
Section 8.3 highlights the deeply tragic case of former NFL player Scott Bolzan.
Oh, I've heard of him. He fell, right?
Yeah, he fell, sustained a severe head injury, and essentially deleted 46 years of his life in an instant.
46 years. I mean, just try to imagine waking up in a sterile hospital room and there are people crying at your bedside.
It's unimaginable.
They claim to be your spouse, your children, but to you, they are absolute strangers. Your episodic memory, the internal narrative of your entire life is completely wiped.
It is a devastating loss of identity. And the mechanism there is that the existing memories just cannot be retrieved.
Wow.
But anterograde amnesia is an entirely different mechanical failure.
How so?
Well, this is the inability to form new memories after the trauma. It typically happens when a blow to the head damages a very specific brain region called the hippocampus.
Okay, wait, let me try an analogy here.
Mhm.
So if retrograde is like having a broken search function for your old files,
Yes.
then anterograde is like having a broken save button for new files. Your short-term RAM works, but the data never transfers to the long-term hard drive.
That analogy captures the mechanism beautifully.
Mhm.
Without the hippocampus, your brain loses the ability to consolidate information.
Consolidation, right?
Yeah. You can hold a perfectly coherent conversation in the present moment, but the second your attention shifts, that short-term data just vanishes forever.
That is wild.
The textbook features perhaps the most famous psychological patient in history, known as HM.
HM, right.
He underwent brain surgery that damaged his hippocampus, leaving him with severe anterograde amnesia. He would literally read the same magazine over and over again.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, genuinely experiencing it as brand new every single time.
Wait, if his hard drive was completely incapable of saving new data, how did he function at all?
That's the crazy part.
Like, could he learn anything new, or was he just trapped in a permanent 10-second loop?
Well, that is the pivotal question researchers asked, and the answer completely revolutionized our understanding of the brain. HM could not form new episodic memories like events or semantic memories, which are facts. However, researchers discovered he could still form procedural memories, the how-to motor skills.
Oh, let me guess. Motor skills don't use the hippocampus.
You hit the nail on the head. Procedural memory relies on entirely different neural pathways, like the basal ganglia and the cerebellum. So researchers gave HM a complex tracing puzzle to solve several days in a row. If you asked him, he would swear he had never seen the puzzle before in his entire life.
Because he couldn't form the episodic memory of it.
Exactly. He had no conscious memory of practicing it, yet his hands became faster and more accurate every single day.
That is, the body literally remembers what the conscious mind cannot. That is staggering.
It really is.
It proves that memory isn't just one big filing cabinet, right?
Yeah.
It is a complex network of different systems.
Absolutely.
But let's bring this back to the healthy brain. Amnesia is a massive hardware failure. Why do my memories, without any brain damage, sometimes feel utterly tampered with?
To understand that, we have to move from hardware to software. We need to distinguish between memory construction, which is the initial creation of a memory, and memory reconstruction.
Reconstruction.
Yeah, reconstruction is the act of bringing that old memory back up into your conscious mind.
And this brings us back to the Wikipedia analogy. Pulling up a memory is not just pressing play on an archived video file.
Not even close. Every time you retrieve a memory from long-term storage into your short-term working memory, a biological process called reconsolidation occurs.
Reconsolidation.
Right. The memory essentially unzips. It becomes chemically unstable and highly flexible.
Unstable, so it changes.
Yes. When your brain saves it again, it often weaves in your current mood, your current environment, or new information you just learned while it was unzipped.
Which introduces a massive vulnerability in our software.
Yeah.
If a memory is unstable every time we recall it, then external suggestions can accidentally be permanently saved into the file.
Exactly. We call that suggestibility. It is the concept that misinformation from external sources leads us to create false memories.
Okay, I have to challenge that premise, though.
Go for it.
Maybe for trivial things, like what I ate for lunch last Tuesday. Sure.
Yeah.
But if the stakes are life and death, like witnessing a horrific crime, the adrenaline and the hyperfocus have to lock those details in accurately, right? Like, the brain wouldn't invent things during a crisis.
You know, it is deeply intuitive to think that high stakes equal high accuracy.
Right.
But the textbook demonstrates that the exact opposite is often true. High stress and trauma actually make our memories more fragmented and therefore much more susceptible to the brain trying to fill in the blanks later.
Wow, really?
Yeah. Consider the DC sniper case from 2002.
Oh, I remember that.
During that terrifying 3-week period of random shootings, a white van was spotted near one of the crime scenes. The police chief went on national television and explicitly discussed this white van.
Oh, the suggestibility mechanism. Let me see if I can trace the causality here.
Do it.
The police chief plants the concept of a white van into the public consciousness.
Yes. And suddenly, multiple eyewitnesses flooded the tip lines, absolutely swearing they had seen a white van fleeing the scenes.
Because it was unzipped and rewritten.
Exactly. The police diverted massive resources to hunt for white vans, ignoring other crucial tips.
Oh, man.
And when the snipers were finally apprehended, they were driving a blue sedan.
That's insane. So those eyewitnesses weren't lying to the police. Their brains recalled the terrifying, chaotic memory of the shooting, unzipped the file, mixed it with the authoritative news report about a white van,
Yep.
and then resaved it as a unified false reality.
Exactly. The brain hates a vacuum. It uses the suggestion to stitch a coherent narrative together. And this mechanism has horrific legal implications.
I can imagine.
The Innocence Project has actually found that eyewitness misidentification is the leading cause of wrongful convictions in cases where DNA later proves innocence.
The case of Ronald Cotton in Section 8.3 is a chilling example of this.
It really is.
Jennifer Thompson was brutally assaulted, and she consciously tried to memorize her attacker's face. Like, she made a point to do it.
She did everything right. But human memory simply isn't designed for that kind of perfect snapshot recall. Days later, police showed her a photo lineup. She deliberated for 5 agonizing minutes and finally pointed to Ronald Cotton's photo, stating, "I think this is the guy."
I think. I mean, that is a fragile, uncertain memory. It is nowhere near beyond a reasonable doubt.
But watch what happens to that fragile memory during reconsolidation. After she picked him, the detective looked at her and said, "You did great."
Oh, no.
It was a tiny, subtle piece of positive reinforcement.
But chemically, That changes everything.
It changes the entire architecture of the memory. The relief and validation she felt in that moment bound itself to the visual memory of Cotton's face.
Wow.
So by the time she testified at trial months later, she had absolutely zero doubt. Her uncertain guess had metastasized into absolute certainty.
And an innocent man served 11 years in maximum security prison because a detective accidentally altered an eyewitness's software with 3 simple words.
Yeah, he was only freed because DNA technology caught up and exonerated him. Now contrast that tragic failure with the Elizabeth Smart kidnapping case.
Okay, how was that different?
The only witness was Elizabeth's 9-year-old sister, Mary Catherine. The police and the FBI were terrified of contaminating her fragile memory with suggestibility.
So they actively avoided the reconsolidation trap. They didn't push her for a composite sketch. They didn't show her endless lineups of suspects.
Exactly. They let the memory sit untouched. And because they protected it, 4 months later, Mary Catherine organically recalled the abductor's voice and correctly identified him as a handyman who had worked at their house.
That's amazing.
If they had aggressively questioned a 9-year-old, they almost certainly would have corrupted the only clue that eventually saved Elizabeth's life.
This implies that language itself is an incredibly dangerous tool. Like, if a detective saying "good job" can send an innocent man to prison, the specific words we use to ask a question must have the power to entirely reshape reality.
Cognitive psychologist Elizabeth Loftus proved exactly that with the misinformation effect paradigm. She wanted to measure the sheer power of a single word.
Okay, I love this part.
In a landmark study, she had college students watch a video of 2 cars colliding. Afterward, she asked them to estimate the speed of the vehicles, but she subtly altered the verb for different groups.
Let's look at the mechanism. If she asks one group how fast the cars were going when they contacted each other, the brain retrieves a minor fender bender.
Correct. But when she asked another group how fast the cars were going when they smashed into each other, the estimated speed skyrocketed.
Just from the word smashed.
Yeah. But Loftus didn't stop there. A week later, she brought the students back and asked a simple yes or no question. Did you see any broken glass in the video?
Let me guess. The video had no broken glass at all.
None. 0. But the students who had heard the word smashed a week prior were more than twice as likely to falsely remember seeing shattered glass.
The word smashed acted as a virus.
Yes.
The brain unzipped the memory, heard smashed, realized that a massive smash logically should include broken glass, and simply hallucinated the physical evidence into the file to make the story make sense.
A single verb rewrote their visual history. Which brings us to the most controversial and heaviest part of Section 8.3.
Okay.
Because if a single verb can invent glass in a video memory, what happens with deeply traumatic long-term autobiographical memories, specifically childhood abuse? This is the intensely debated territory of repressed and recovered memories.
Yeah. We are looking at 2 very different schools of thought here, right?
Very different.
On one side, we have researchers arguing that a child's brain can experience trauma so horrific that it intentionally walls off the memory just to allow the child to psychologically survive.
Yes, and there is significant data supporting that mechanism.
Right.
Researchers John Briere and John Conte studied adults who were actively receiving treatment for documented childhood sexual abuse.
Right.
They discovered that an astonishing 59% of these individuals had completely forgotten their experiences before entering treatment.
So for over half of those people, repression wasn't a theory. It was a documented reality.
Mm.
The memories were successfully blocked and then later recovered.
According to that side of the psychological community, yes. They argue these deeply buried memories can be safely unlocked through therapies like guided imagery or hypnosis.
Okay, but what about the other side?
Elizabeth Loftus represents the other side of this fierce debate. She warns of false memory syndrome.
Because guided imagery and hypnosis are practically the definition of high suggestibility environments.
Exactly. Loftus is not denying that childhood abuse occurs, but she severely questions the therapeutic mechanisms used to recover these blank periods.
Makes sense.
If a patient is in a highly suggestible hypnotic state and a well-meaning therapist asks leading questions about abuse, the patient's brain might simply invent the trauma to please the therapist or to find a cause for their current depression.
And the textbook cites a deeply unsettling study about this vulnerability involving toddlers, conducted by researchers Stephen Ceci and Maggie Brooks.
It is a profound demonstration of suggestibility. They worked with 3-year-old children who had recently received routine, completely appropriate physical exams from their pediatricians. The researchers used anatomically correct dolls and asked the toddlers leading questions about where the doctor had touched them.
And because 3-year-olds are incredibly eager to please adults, and because the questions were suggestive,
55% of those toddlers pointed to the genital or anal areas on the dolls.
oh, wow.
None of them had received any form of genital exam. Repeated leading questions forced the children's brains to construct a mental image that quickly hardened into a false memory.
It proved that the line between a recovered memory and a planted memory is just dangerously thin.
Dangerously thin, yes.
Well, it is a terrifying vulnerability. But as the student in this dynamic, I need to pivot us away from courtrooms and trauma for a moment.
Pivot away.
I need to understand my own daily incompetence. I understand why a traumatic memory might distort, but why do I walk into a room and instantly forget why I went in there?
Right, the everyday stuff.
Yeah, why can't I remember where I put my keys 5 minutes ago?
For that, we turn to psychologist Daniel Schachter, who categorized our everyday software bugs into what he calls the 7 sins of memory.
7 sins, I love
They
that.
groups them into 3 main categories: forgetting, distortion, and intrusion. Let's start with the first, forgetting sin, encoding failure.
Okay, so the textbook uses the U.S. Penny study to explain this, and I have to admit, it completely humbled me.
It humbles everyone.
They asked people to pick the accurately drawn penny out of a lineup of fakes with the text or the profile facing the wrong way. Almost nobody can do it. I couldn't do it.
Most people can't. And the mechanism here isn't that you forgot what a penny looks like. It is that you never actually learned it.
Well, okay.
The human brain is ruthlessly efficient. It only encodes the absolute minimum amount of data required to function. You only need to know that a penny is copper-colored and slightly larger than a dime to spend it.
Wow. So it isn't a deleted file. It is a file my brain never bothered to download in the first place because the direction Lincoln is facing is useless data.
Exactly. But what about the information you actually do encode? That leads to the second sin, transience.
Transient, okay.
Memories simply degrade over time if they aren't accessed. Herman Ebbinghaus proved this way back in 1885. He memorized lists of nonsense syllables and tracked how quickly they vanished from his mind.
The famous Ebbinghaus forgetting curve.
The very same. He found that an average person loses 50% of newly memorized information after just 20 minutes.
50%.
Yes. The mechanism is synaptic pruning. If your brain doesn't fire those specific neural pathways again, it assumes the information is useless and breaks the connections to save energy.
Note to self. Reviewing notes once a week before an exam is biologically useless if the brain deletes half of it in 20 minutes.
Yeah, a bad strategy.
So what is the next forgetting sin?
Absent-mindedness. This is a failure of attention. The textbook shares a highly relatable story from a psychologist named Cynthia.
Oh, this one stressed me out.
She was at a courthouse and had to return a highly secure temporary ID badge before leaving. But just as she reached the exit, her phone rang. It was her daughter's daycare calling to say her child was sick.
So cortisol floods the system. The brain immediately shifts all processing power to the crisis.
Entirely. Attention is the gatekeeper to the hippocampus. Cynthia rushed out, picked up her daughter, and later that night had a panic attack because she could not remember returning the secure badge.
And she had to call the court, right?
Yeah, she called them. She had, in fact, handed it back, but her attention was so violently hijacked by her sick child that the routine action never passed the gatekeeper. The memory never formed.
It's the cognitive equivalent of putting the milk in the pantry because you were arguing on speakerphone.
Exactly.
So that is absent-mindedness. But what happens when the brain records the data perfectly, but you still can't access it?
That is the final forgetting sin. Blocking. It is the universally agonizing tip-of-the-tongue phenomenon.
Oh, like when the actor who played the brilliant, calm inmate in The Shawshank Redemption, but your brain just throws up a blank wall.
Morgan Freeman.
Right.
The memory is fully encoded and securely saved on the hard drive. But in that specific moment, a phenomenon called lateral inhibition occurs.
Lateral inhibition.
Yeah. Your brain pulls up related but incorrect pathways. Maybe it brings up Denzel Washington or Samuel L. Jackson, and those incorrect pathways actually suppress the correct pathway. You are temporarily blocked from accessing the file.
Fascinating. So the forgetting sins are mostly just the brain being overly efficient or temporarily scrambled?
But basically, yeah.
But let's look at the second category, distortion. Forgetting where my keys are is annoying, but remembering things completely wrong feels like my brain is actively gaslighting me.
It does feel like that.
We already covered suggestibility with the Loftus car crash. What are the other distortions?
A major one is misattribution. This is a source monitoring error. You perfectly encode the information, but you completely lose the tag that tells you where or when you acquired it.
The Donald Thompson story from Section 8.3 is the ultimate mind-bending example of this. I actually had to read it twice to believe it.
It is legendary in psychology circles. Donald Thompson was a prominent Australian expert on the unreliability of eyewitness memory.
The irony.
So much irony. He was arrested, placed in a physical lineup, and a victim positively identified him as the man who had brutally assaulted her in her apartment.
But his alibi wasn't just strong, it was indisputable.
Indisputable. At the exact moment the assault took place, Donald Thompson was miles away, sitting in a television studio, broadcasting live on air.
Wow.
And to add the ultimate irony, he was being interviewed about how easily eyewitnesses make mistakes.
Just how does a victim's brain mistake a man on a television screen for the physical attacker in her living room? Like, how does that happen?
Source misattribution. Investigators discovered that during the horrifying attack, the victim's television was on. She was watching Thompson's live broadcast.
Oh my God.
Her traumatized brain encoded the visual data of his face flawlessly, but in the panic, it stripped away the source tag. When she tried to reconstruct the face of her attacker later, her brain provided Thompson's face without the context that it came from the TV screen.
A flawlessly recorded file placed in the entirely wrong folder.
Precisely.
That leads us to the final category, intrusion. If forgetting is a failure to recall, intrusion must be a failure to forget.
Exactly. Schachter calls it persistence. Sometimes the brain's survival mechanism goes into overdrive. It decides a memory is so critical that it violently forces it into your working memory over and over.
Oh, like trauma.
Mildly, this is a pop song looping in your head. Severely, this is a military veteran experiencing PTSD. Their amygdala is hyperactivated, causing them to involuntarily recall traumatic combat memories that severely disrupt their daily life.
The software is failing because it is doing its job too well. The alarm bell won't turn off.
Exactly.
Finally, we have interference. This is when multiple files are actively competing with each other, right?
Yes, and it flows in two directions: proactive and retroactive interference. Proactive interference is when old information actively hinders your ability to recall newly learned information.
Ooh. Like trying to drive to a new job, but your brain's autopilot keeps steering your car toward your old office.
A perfect metaphor. The heavily worn neural pathway of the old data aggressively steps in front of the new, fragile pathway.
Got it. And retroactive.
Retroactive interference is the exact opposite. New information hinders your recall of older information.
So if I spend years learning French and then suddenly immerse myself in learning Spanish, the new Spanish grammar rules and vocabulary aggressively overwrite the French pathways I built years ago.
Precisely. The shiny new data retroactively scrambles the old data.
Well, Professor, I think my own working memory is officially at maximum capacity. Let's step out of the student and lecturer roles to land this plane.
Gladly. Class dismissed.
So looking at everything we unpacked today, from the textbook, from amnesia to Elizabeth Loftus to the 7 sins, the unifying theme is undeniable.
It is.
We have to fundamentally discard the idea that memory is a flawless, objective archive. It is an incredibly fragile, highly suggestible, reconstructive puzzle, and the pieces change shape every time we touch them.
And we almost never realize the pieces have changed, which leads to one final, deeply personal concept from Schachter that we haven't touched on yet: egocentric bias.
That sounds like our brains have an ego problem.
They absolutely do. Schachter notes that our memory naturally distorts past events in a way that enhances our own role.
Wait, really?
Yeah. When you look back at a group project you did years ago, you genuinely remember yourself doing the lion's share of the work. When you remember a high school soccer game, you remember yourself making the critical play, even if you're just a supporting player.
We naturally rewrite the Wikipedia page to ensure we are always the main character of the story.
We do. Our brains are highly motivated editors. So, I want you listening to leave this deep dive with a provocative question to ponder.
Let's hear it.
If our brains are constantly, secretly rewriting history to make us the hero, and if memory is as incredibly flexible, suggestible, and prone to error as we've learned today, how much of your core identity is actually based on a completely fictionalized version of your own past?